Greetings and welcome to the pit for a neck-breaking, head-banging episode of Genre Grinder. I'm your host, Gabe, the Blood Blender Powers, and with me today is returning guest, Justin Blackwater Clark. Today we're looking at heavy metal horror movies. How you doing, Justin?
I am doing good. I am, well, quite apt to my name. I am very cold and my voice is gravelier than normal. So, yes,
Okay.
it all comes together.
It all comes together. Awesome. So this was technically my idea because when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with Justin, I think of him as one of my metal friends. And I was always a punk rock kid, but I like to pride myself, especially as an adult, on broad musical tastes. And thanks to Christine, the last decade or certain 13 years now have been me kind of being reintroduced to a lot of metal and sort of discovering what I like and what I don't like. And there's 20, 30, almost 30 years of bands I just didn't know about that I've been catching up on. And Justin has been helpful in this regard. When I ask him, when I say, Justin, I like Gojira, what's like Gojira? And he thinks for a second and he goes, how about this? And I go, okay.
And yeah, you're in a good place. You have 30 years worth of music to still run through where people aren't going to be screaming in your ear, oh, that's not real hardcore. You have to go and listen to actual hardcore. You have to go listen to Blender hardcore, so whatever genre they come up with this week.
And the punk rock scene is just as awful when it comes to that, where like, oh, you can't listen to that band, they sold out, or they play too many chords, or some other bullshit. So fans can be exhausting. And I suppose I should acknowledge that I called it heavy metal horror because I like the way that sounds, but most of these movies don't feature what modern heavy metal fans would consider heavy metal music. Just because
I was going to mention that part of it, because like, despite what I said, just like every heavy metal fan has their own genre names and whatnot. I'm sitting here through most of it. I'm just like, God damn it, guys! Like, I know it was the '80s.
Yeah, we're this really more hard rock.
Yeah,
a little bit of that, slight hair metal thing going on. I watched a couple that I didn't make you watch that had even more of the hair metal thing. And then there's some that, we're going into new wave because some of these are 80s movies. And so there's some of that poppy stuff.
Which, to be fair, there's good hair metal. And like one of the movies we do, like the tunes are actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
It's just that the band looks like, well, we'll get there. Yeah, let's go.
We'll get there. There's none of these are going to be, I couldn't find any interesting movies that are like starring, Iron Maiden lookalikes, so we're not going to have there's not a lot of fun early 80s, late 70s kind of metal. And I think all these movies are too old for death metal to have really been a mainstream. They barely, that we're talking about when I was in high school in the late 90s, and death metal was sort of becoming a mainstream thing, but
this is the era that I miss, because I don't know if I ever told this story about how I actually got into metal. I will spare some time here, but basically I didn't get into it until like the mid 90s, which is, for a lot of metal fans, that's the dark ages, just for not that much was going on. So I got the chance to play a little catch up, and then I was just like right in on the ground floor when, everything kind of resurged in like the early 2000s. So I kind of missed hair metal, but I got to catch up and, got everything kind of filtered through. This was the cream of the crop.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, I'm just enough older than you that hair metal was like at its saturation point, and it was really awful for a while there. There's always those documentaries where they're talking to some hair metal band, and then in the background you can hear the riff from Smells Like Teen Spirit, and the narrator goes, but everything was about to change. I've seen that in like 30 documentaries. Poor Nirvana being blamed for the fact that this was a saturated environment of very mediocre music. They just were in the right place at the right time. But I should say, as far as the era you got into it, the thing that brought me back into metal, the band that made me want to listen to metal again, was Static X. So I have no like a cool guy leg to stand on here. I really liked Static X a lot.
No, Static X is good. It's just that, and I was mentioning this when the documentaries were out, but just my greatest fear is like I'm going to be in like my mid 50s, and the documentary where it's like, but everything was about to change, and it's going to be a Woodstock 99 thing.
Yeah.
It's Limp Bizkit about to play break stuff there, and that's when metal goes away for a little bit.
Yeah, there were definitely obnoxious bands of that era. I think that's the biggest issue, but we're
Right.
not going to have to touch on that because we were none of these movies were quite that. Well, one was technically that era, but it's almost the least metal of the ones I picked. So I should also acknowledge that I ended up sort of picking these, and that Justin had picked Green Room and Mandy, which are both. Well, I'm not a huge Mandy fan, but Green Room is a movie I could end up talking a lot about just because it's so ingrained in the skinhead culture of the late night or of the mid 90s specifically, like to the point where I can't believe it's supposed to take place in the 2010s, that I could talk about all that stuff. But in my brain I was like, but that's such a popular movie, and we got to dig deeper into something that maybe I just have a feeling better podcasts have talked about those two movies a lot already. So I feel
Yeah,
a
you're
little
not
bad.
wrong.
I feel a little bad, but I don't know. We also talked about Green Room way back when I did an episode about the best horror movies of the 2010s. Then before we get into the last thing is that I have the ye old list of podcast ideas I've had since I came up with the idea for the Genre Grinder podcast. But I have to say that I was re-inspired to do heavy metal horror because there's a YouTube channel, Rob Hill's Bad Movie Bible, and he's written books too. And he did a whole thing on heavy metal horror, and it just made me say I got to catch up because I really hadn't seen any of these. I'd heard about them for years, but I hadn't seen any of them. So part of the reason why I don't do a YouTube channel is because every time I watch one of the Bad Movie Bible things, I'm like, well, this is pretty much what I would have done, and I just would have not done it as well. So everybody should go look up Bad Movie Bible, and especially his Borrowing Blockbusters series, which is about rip-offs of Hollywood movies. He just did a Raiders of the Lost Ark one. It was great. My cat is making so much noise.
I can hear that in the background. Well, I
Can
mean, it's a heavy metal content. It's a
Yeah.
heavy metal episode. Just like that's your familiar right there. You just got to run with it.
Oh, are you back? Are you done? You done? Okay. She's looking at me. She says, I'm all done. I'm going to go lay down. Okay.
Oh, good.
Anyway, so unless you have any other introductory things, we can get into it.
Nope, not really. Again, like no need to apologize because despite varying quality on all of these, each one of them had something to offer that I was just like, I ain't never seen that before. Let's go.
Yeah, I tried to sort of pump myself full of them and then just kind of come up with the ones I thought would be the most fun to talk about because I really hadn't. I had actually probably actively avoided a lot of these movies over the years.
I mean,
So
like it must be said, just like the number of movies that you actually watched for this versus how many I had to watch
yeah,
is incredible. You were the sin eater for this episode.
yeah. It just felt like something I needed under my belt. We're gonna start in 1985 with Hard Rock Zombies, and to sort of set the stage, you can take rock and roll horror back to stuff like Phantom of the Paradise, Rocky Horror Picture Show. If we're talking about a band doing the soundtrack, Suspiria has a sort of rock soundtrack to it. But the idea of heavy metal horror, as in horror movies about heavy metal and hard rock music and the musicians playing them, that sort of begins in the 80s. And there's like a little series of them. There was Beverly Sebastian's Rocktober Blood in 1984, and that was followed by Hard Rock Zombies, which we're going to talk about, Trick or Treat, Black Roses, which we're going to talk about, Rock and Roll Nightmare, Monster Dog, Hard Rock Nightmare, Rockula, and Shock 'em Dead. And so I tried to watch as many of those as I could. I couldn't find Trick or Treat. Rock and Roll Nightmare was, it's okay. Monster Dog's pretty awful. Shock 'em Dead is only good if you were one of those kids who grew up wanting to learn speed metal guitar and you watched those videos, and I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but they made fun of it on Death or on Metalocalypse special features so perfectly. And it's just this guy doing these impossible things and going, now you can do it. And then he goes back through and you're just like, now, what are you talking about? Here, I'll do it slower. No, slower still. But he's the finger stunt man on Shock 'em Dead. So that's the reason to see that movie if you had. And then one that keeps coming up that I watched for this called Slaughterhouse Rock is not a heavy metal horror movie. It's a Nightmare on Elm Street riff about ghosts on Alcatraz, aka The Rock. That I can see the
In
confusion.
fairness, that sounds awesome.
It was It wasn't bad. Recommend. I honestly recommend for like mid '80s. It was basically Nightmare on Elm Street meets Demons. Tony Basil's in it, and she plays a ghost who helps a guy enter the ethereal plane by doing a dance. And the soundtrack was by Devo. So it's yeah, that one's worth it. Not what we're covering here, but yeah, I think it's still on Shutter. So watch that one
I
if you're
think it
up
was
for.
worth it just to hear that sentence spoken out loud.
Yeah, I mean Tony Basil. Sorry,
Basil.
I don't know
Yeah.
what my accent is, to tell you the truth. I some of those words I say either way. I think it's because Arizona basically has the California accent, which just isn't an accent. It's just so yeah. I watched this movie. I went into it knowing that there was a lot of what the fuckery going on, but I didn't realize how much until I really started watching.
Yeah, I didn't know anything going in. And when it started, again, this was for a heavy metal horror, and it has the lamest band. Like everyone's like running around, like dancing this band. Just like this band's going to change the world, man. They're awesome. They're
Mm-hmm.
so hardcore, and they sound like Bon Jovi's laziest out. Like this sounds like Midnight in Chelsea Bon Jovi.
Yeah,
It's
that
wild that they're like this controversial.
one thing that makes the movie, if we're talking about movies as movies, one thing that makes something like Rock and Roll Nightmare work a little better is that the band themselves are supposed to be kind of bad and they're trying to be better. Whereas this movie doesn't really have stuff like plot and sense and stuff. This is a movie. Well, that's right. I'm gonna read the synopsis as it's read on Letterboxd here.
Oh,
It
this ought
says
to be good.
it says a hard rock band travels to a tiny remote town called Grand Guignol to perform. Populated by Hicks, Rubes, werewolves, murderous dwarves, sex perverts, and Hitler, the town is a strange place that doesn't stop the band's lead singer from falling in love with a local girl named Cassie. After Nazi sex perverts kill the band to satisfy their lusts, Cassie calls the rockers back from the grave to save her. So, I mean, those are all things that technically happen in this movie.
Yeah, like on paper, yes, that is exactly what this movie was about.
So, like, you can tell someone this is a movie where Hitler and Eva Braun have survived somehow and are living in rural America, and they have mutant dwarf grandchildren.
Well, hold on, let's rewind because at the beginning is like so we see the band play and like maybe about what 10 minutes in, we just randomly cut to this old couple just getting it on in bed.
Yeah.
You have no idea who it is. And at first I was like, oh, he's 95 and is still very into his wife. You know what? Good for him. Good for you, Grams. I hope I'm that virile when I'm your age. And then about 45 minutes later, I regretted everything I just thought there.
Well, the
Just
thing is, I would argue that's one of the least weird things because that just seems like a sort of cheesy joke once you get through it. You're like, oh, okay, dwarf humor. It's very trauma, you know. Ha ha, dwarfs are short. Ha ha, Hitler's edgy, you know. Like a lot of, and then like there's icky part where the dwarfs want to watch him have sex, and it's very, very trauma. But like,
Harry.
that's sort of that's something I can watch and understand on a conceptual level. The execution of this movie is super brain dead. It doesn't make sense even on that level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also just to rewind, I do know there was probably a website for this at one point, but I mean, like, it is, I timed it 1 minute, 45 seconds before there's boobs in this movie. Is that the fastest a horror movie has ever just gotten down to? We know what you're here for. Let's get it out of the way so we can get to Hitler.
There's got to be something that is literally just opens on breasts. I can't think of it
Right.
off the top of my head, but there's got to be some grotty little grindhouse thing that is
Exactly.
just like opening credits over breasts. But it is
But
pretty
just
fast.
Yeah, but just to move on from that again, like it goes to boobs, it goes to murder, it goes to perv mutants, then it goes to band, then it goes to Gramps getting it on in bed, 95 years old, and then they get to this town, which is like it feels like it's trying to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, except expanded out to an entire population.
Well, did you ever see the movie 2000 Maniacs? The
I
original.
did not.
So I think that what they were going for was 2000 Maniacs is a very early gore movie. It's silly, it's fun. It's Brigadoon with murderous Confederates that come around once every, I can't remember if it's once every 10 years they come out and they kill some Yankees and then they go back into their whatever. But it's funny because it's Brigadoon. And so I feel like this is Brigadoon with fascists and, well, I mean, you could say Confederates are fascists. We won't get into that argument, but it's
Yeah,
Brigadoon with fascists, and there are some on the nose jokes about the fascists and their sort of they're fitting the Reagan era of right wingism, the Reagan and I suppose oh boy, what's her name? Who is Al Gore's wife's name
Tipper
was
Gore.
Tipper Gore. So there's a sort of Tipper Gore Reaganite Nancy Reagan thing going on.
Yeah, I had forgotten for the longest time just how prevalent the whole satanic panic thing was
Yes.
because we're so far removed from it.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a recurring theme, but just like, God, like they really were afraid of rock and roll corrupting the youth back then. And it seems so
Well, especially
like
because rock and roll had been
unfathomable.
around for like 30 years. It wasn't like a new thing. It was just sort of repackaged.
True, but
Um,
like even like by metal standards, like what
yeah,
like you have like I mean I always put like Beatles Helter Skelter as like the first metal song. So like
yeah,
1969 and it's like 25 years of just like hardcore music, and these guys aren't even the hardest band imaginable, and they're acting like they just saw Slayer for the first time.
yeah. But yes, this was something people took very seriously. And I think that the Satanic Panic thing, if I really wanted to break down heavy metal horror, it like almost has to take place in the Reagan era during the Satanic Panic. It's almost a requirement. If I was gonna if like I had to write a book about this, I would be like, that's how I'm gonna narrow it down. It has to be during the Reagan era, 80 to 88, and Satanic Panic has to come into it somehow.
Just like
But
you need something there to freak out the straights, and
yeah,
again, like this is what was freaking out the straights at this point in history.
this is on Blu-ray, and I think there are extras. I just didn't want to go out of my way to buy it. There's a making of documentary, so I some of this might be explained, but from what I was able to figure out, the reason this movie makes no sense is that it was designed to be a movie within a movie for the film American Drive-In. There was supposed to be a movie called Hard Rock Zombies playing on the screens in the background of this movie American Drive-In, which is like, kind of Porky's at a drive-in, from what I understand. And then at some point, they're like, we actually have enough footage. We can make this into a feature-length movie. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it really is just a series of jokes that are then stitched together by increasingly less and less B-roll footage to the point where the movie ends with like they have this actress who can dance, so they just have footage of her dancing that they're just cutting in to fill time during things.
Yeah, she's like the Pied Piper. Like, I mean, just to rewind on that as well, just like there's just this random hot chick in this like group of hillbillies
Yeah.
who like she's just there to look hot and have a topless scene and whatnot. And like the band comes to town and like one of them tries to go like, okay, let's rewind. He walks into the house while she's taking a shower, is like, ooh, I want to go hit that. Strips naked, goes, hangs out with her in the shower. They talk about horror movies in the shower. She's like, have you seen Psycho? Produces a knife. He says, oh no, with all the conviction of like his soup came out of the microwave too hot. It's
Yeah.
the most hilarious shock face I have ever seen.
Yep.
And this is her role through the entire movie, and like just sneaking up on people, and these people not acting surprised at their surprise.
And I mean, I wonder if they added that. Knowing what I know, I wonder if all of her scenes were added after the fact because like we need to fill time. We need
It
to find
wouldn't
some way
surprise
for this to
me.
make sense.
And I forget, was this like post Return of the Living Dead, where like maybe they were trying to like emulate
it,
trash being in there?
it would have been released the same year.
Okay, so not far enough where they would have been like, hey, we got a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah, this would have been the. It's so funny to think this came out the same year as Return of the Living Dead and The Reanimator, two genuinely funny horror comedies. I think they're doing a Paul Bartel or Kentucky Fried Movie kind of thing, and it might make more sense if it was like Kentucky Fried Movie, where it was just skit after skit. But the effort in putting it into a ongoing storyline is what makes it, to people like me who look for weird movies, that sort of, it's like you have a fever and you took too much cold medication, and and you're trying to watch late night cable back in, the late 80s, when they would play the heavy metal music videos, and then you have like your dumbest edgelord cousin making Nazi jokes in your ear the whole time too. It's kind of something. It's this sort of outsider art thing that people like me kind of live for. So I'm not really necessarily enjoying myself, but I'm like, wow, what happened here? How did this occur?
And my whole thing, like, it makes sense that they just kind of expanded out the joke too long because, yeah, and let's just go through it now. Like the band comes to town, they start getting offed. They are brought back to life by this, this special bass riff that can reanimate dead things.
Hmm.
Which, to be fair, that bass riff is kind of awesome. It sounds like early Opeth kind of going on. I was just like, hey, this is the best thing you played all movie. Good for y'all.
Yeah.
That happens. The band comes back to life fast enough to get to the real twist, which is the old man who like runs this house they're staying at is actually Adolf Hitler
Yeah.
and Eva Braun, who intends to just raise an army of the dead to go kill all the Jews? Question
It's
mark.
it's not even clear that they have any sort of plan. Like in some scenes, it seems like the people in the town don't know that Hitler and Eva Braun live in town. And other scenes, some of them seem to know, and some there seems to be a plan. In some scenes, it seems like the parental groups that are worried about this are genuine.
Right. And the thing is, like, that twist happens, and then, like, the band is undead, and they finally, like, get in their minds to go kill Hitler.
Uh huh.
And by the time, like, all the zombies are surrounding Hitler, they've, like, finally taken him down. I thought that was the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And then I looked at the clock and saw it was halfway through the movie,
Yeah.
and
It was
something in me felt so nauseous.
it's exact same thing. I started to get up and like I was gonna go get a drink, and I hit pause because I'm like, it's probably just the credits. And I I looked at the timeline and went, what? Wait, exact same thing happened to me. And that's another thing that these just nonsense. I learned this when Patrick and I were watching so many shot on video horror movies, like movies made by people who have no business making movies and are just doing it to do it. There's like a point where like time has no meaning when you're watching something that makes no sense. It's like you don't like, sometimes it goes by real fast and sometimes it takes forever and you don't understand what's happening to you. I think the idea is you're supposed to put this on at a party and not really pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's
But
just a background noise kind of movie, which means Netflix should be all over this. Like, this is a
yeah,
perfect. Oh, let's get them viewer numbers up, like that
yeah.
kind of movie. There's at least two things in here which are actually I was like, oh, that's not bad. One, the band actually does get better once they're dead.
Yes.
Like, there's like more, and even just a rewind on that, there's a song they sing about like the young girl that helps them in town about, and there's a line in
Cassie's
there that
song.
it's like, I love you, but you're so young, which is never a good way to start anything
No.
ever for any reason, unless you're Drake, in which case, thank you for incriminating yourself. But other than that, just, it's the worst. But
It,
again, once they're dead, they have like this whole Street Angel song, which is actually kind of badass. I was just like, good for
I
y'all.
like
You
Street
got that.
Angel. I wrote
Yeah,
that down. I it's pretty boppy. I like Street Angel quite a bit actually.
not bad at all. So that was good. And then later on, there is exactly one parentheses number one gag that actually worked for me, which is, you know, the stripper girl is leading all of these zombies into a bunker, and Hitler is there just sig heiling every single zombie as they walk into the room like he's a Walmart greeter.
Uh-huh.
And something about that image just made me cackle. I think I was just looking for any port in a storm at that point, but I did love it.
So now this is part we're watching so many of the movies in a row. I actually can't remember. Is this the one where the guy randomly decides that the zombies don't like heads, so they just print up giant cardboard cutout
Yeah,
heads?
they try to like walk down the street, and it did not work.
That was kind of funny because it doesn't because it's that was one joke that felt like a Paul Bartel. I don't know if you've ever seen like Death Race 2000 or Eating Raoul.
I've seen Eating Raoul and
Yeah,
was really baffled at what the hell I was watching. But
that felt like a actual Paul Bartel joke to me. Like that was like, okay, yeah, this is absurdist humor. It's just like some people don't like absurdist humor can be really bad if you're just trying to do the weirdest thing instead
yeah,
of
I mean, like, it's like the perfect encapsulation of that one Steve Martin quote about like comedy can be art, but if you try making art comedy, you've already failed.
yeah. I also something I didn't realize until afterwards is the version we watched was the uncut unrated version. There
Oh,
was some stuff was cut for a rating because this was, believe it or not, released in theaters, which was surprising because it's pretty tame even by mid 80s MPAA
yeah,
standards.
what they cut out?
I'm not sure exactly. I'm gonna guess it's just the gore, just the couple bloody bits.
Fair.
I mean, 85. It's a little hard. Like the MPA got really strict after Friday 13th was a big hit, and parent groups complained. So I guess they just like a certain amount of blood was just too much blood. But that was a little surprising to me because it's really tame. I mean, even the sex is really tame. It's basically just nudity.
Right. Like by 80 standards, you got to raise those numbers. Those are
Yeah.
rookie numbers right there.
But that's all I got on this just absolutely singular film. Did you have any other thoughts on it?
Nope, I got nothing. Again, like halfway through, I was just sort of like, how is this not done
It's
yet?
just it
And
just becomes a fever dream. It's just sort of like we gotta fill time, and then they filled too much time.
right, it was just like, I will allow this movie to pass over me and through me. I must not fear all that. And finally, it was over.
Pretty much. God, you should be so thankful that I decided not to make you watch some of the bits I watched from I can't remember what it was called. It was a shot on video one, and I'm like, yeah, this is too much to ask. I can't make him watch this. This is literally like, this is children playing around. This is
Oh,
not
God.
a film. So yeah, I cut that one. So then, okay, we'll move on to Black Roses. I just it's just forever remembered by people of a certain age as the movie with the giant 3D clamshell VHS box that always had to be loaded front facing at the video store because it wouldn't fit sideways because the whole image was in 3D and it was so gaudy. And I never rented it for that exact reason. Back in the day, I just said, "Ugh, what is ugh?" Gimmick VHS boxes. I rented Frankenhooker, which if you push a button goes, "Want a date?" And then there's one with light up eyes on the zombie. I can't remember which one that was. I rented those, but this one was just it was so gross and gaudy.
Which is
Um,
ironic because of the stuff that we watched, this was actually the best overall movie.
yeah, I mean, I think this is the definitive platonic ideal of a heavy metal horror movie. This is like if you say, "Hey, let's watch a heavy metal horror movie." I think Black Roses is like what I pictured in my brain. People really don't like it, but I thought it was the better of those other ones I watched. It
Yeah, it
just sort of
wasn't bad. Like again, like I have issues with the actual music, but even that wasn't terrible. I mean, just like you're on the right track. Just I do not believe you're the devil, sir.
I'll read the attempt at whoever filled in on Letterboxd what they say. Oh, they didn't say much. Teens in a small conservative town are turned into evil demons thanks to the music of the titular heavy metal band. This is directed by John Fasano. I didn't say the director of Black or Hard Rock Zombies was Krishna Saha or
Yeah,
Shah. Shaw,
that was
sorry.
the surprising part. Just like this Indian director doesn't have anything else like hard rock or metally or even like all that trashy on his resume, and
No.
that's what he did.
Yeah, I mean, American Drive-In is his other most famous movie, and this one's more famous. The movie he made to go in American Drive-In. But so yeah, so I'm sure there's a really interesting story there, and maybe I should get the Blu-ray at some point. I don't know, but I'm sure there's all sorts of really cool behind the scenes stories in that. It's just too weird of a movie. Whereas Black Roses is pretty straightforward. I think I would call this is sort of a piece with Demons, but with a rock band instead of a which Demons is. Did you ever see Demons, the Italian horror?
Way back in the day, but yes.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of heavy metal horror just because they purposely threw a lot of heavy metal in on the soundtrack.
Right.
But this sort of has the same idea where the music is turning people into demons, and they put a lot of emphasis on the special effects of the transformation into demons. It's a low budget, but I still thought some of the effects were pretty impressive for how cheap I knew it was.
Yeah, for the budget, it's actually pretty effective. Like, there's one transformation in there, which is like, they kind of screwed up with just like this weird purple glow around it. But
Mhm.
the actual makeup effect under it is actually pretty impressive. So
Yeah.
it's got that.
What's interesting about this one is it is a real band backing up. The lead singer is an actor, but the rest of the band is a real band.
Ah,
They're mostly members from King Cobra, both with K's, King Cobra.
hmm.
I don't know if I should get into this so early. I'll go back to it. We'll go back to who King Cobra is because there's something kind of there's some interesting things going on there. The fact that it's a real heavy metal band, the storyline, it being like rural, rural suburban, overtaking, goes way more into the Satanic Panic thing even than the previous one. There's sports cars. There's a chrome title font. The school bully body slams a guy wearing an Iron Maiden shirt. There's a cool teacher who wears a hoodie with a turtleneck, and he's played by a daytime soap super hunk John Martin, and he's teaching Whitman. And it was so funny to me because the cool teacher at my high school, also taught Whitman. It's like, oh, it's Mr. Acosta, but with a turtleneck.
Like you said, it's kind of that quintessential metal horror kind of thing of just one, the Satanic Panic is there, but like this really leans into the parents are all suburban and lame and they suck, aside
Yeah,
from the teacher and his giant Tom Atkins mustache. But
yeah. I
all
mean,
the other, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's sort of halfway between satirizing the parents because the parents are definitively lame in the movie's eyes, but then also the parents aren't, they're not wrong. The music is turning their children into
Right.
demons. So it's like, God, look at these lame people. But like you think like a really good version of this, which I'm sure exists because there are a lot of movies we didn't watch, and there's been a lot over the last 10 years. But a good version of this is one where it turns out that the parents are the bad guys and that the metal band's the good guys. But that's not where they were at with this.
Yep.
Uh,
Again, it was the 80s, different
yeah,
vibe. But even then, like, yeah, just like every single time you go to one of these parents, only it is every 80s music video, like the start of every 80s
hmm
music video come to life. Just like
yeah.
the
It's just
parent does not like thing kid is doing.
it's
Oh no, but they
we're
listen
not
to
gonna
metal.
we're not gonna take it, and parents just don't understand, all wrapped into one.
Right.
um,
So one of the parents is Big Pussy from The Sopranos, and when I saw that, I was just like, I did a Leo point straight up at the screen.
Yeah, Vincent Pastore, and he maybe gets the best death in the whole movie. He gets eaten by a speaker goblin.
Right. Yeah. Like that was legitimately shocking, even as cheap as the effect was.
Yeah, it's like if you want to picture it, if you don't feel like watching this movie out there, it's sort of like what if Videodrome had a lower budget and instead of video equipment, it was audio equipment killing people. It kind of looked like that,
Yeah,
and
that
it,
one was kind of rad.
and then also the creature from the Black Lagoon's girlfriend, Julie Adams, is in this as a sort of extended cameo as a complete Nancy Reagan lookalike, which was kind of cute. Um,
Yeah.
from like just like a horror historian point of view. Yeah,
Most of this is actually pretty well done. Again, like the build up to like, hey, this band is coming to town. They might be corrupting our children. The
yeah,
parents are like go to the concert. The only real flaw is again, like, they have this one big concert, like the band goes up on stage, the singer's wearing like, this weird, like kind of, you know, stop making sense suit on stage, and they're like, oh, he's not so bad. He's singing this power ballad. And then
Yeah,
the real
they put on like the gentle one for the parents. That's actually kind of
right,
funny.
and then like the parents are gone, and just like, all right, now the real concert can begin. They coat off. They are wearing what, like, I always wondered back in the day, like, how did no one understand that Robert Halford was gay back in the
Right.
day? There is no question with this band. This is the quintessential like BDSM outfit for an 80s band.
Yeah. And they also look a lot like Wasp did at the time. Like
As well.
there's something about the mix of BDSM and spandex that makes that era just extra grotesque.
Right. And just they start playing, and again the music is actually, it's pretty standard hair metal from the age, and
Yeah.
the guy, I don't know if the actor is the one singing. I have to imagine he's
No,
not.
that's something I'll talk about later. The actor is the lead singer, because he has lines. He has actual lines, so they
Right.
got him to lip sync. But the rest of the band is a real band.
Right. And just, the hair metal itself is not terrible,
No,
but
for
it's
what it
also not,
is.
yeah, for what it is, but it's also not good enough to be turning, like, every single time one of these kids listens to this, they're just sort of like, I think I'm going to start a fire and join a Manson cult. Like,
Yeah,
it's that level of flip. I just don't see that from this band.
I think one of the things it's trying to be seriously scary about is the funniest, which is the way the kids sort of turn into murderers and stuff. I think all that stuff's hilarious, and I think that
Yes.
that is meant to be the serious horror part of the film.
Yeah, like there is the one parent where, like, the rest of them are just sort of like, I don't like you doing this, and just like, you don't tell me what to do, Dad, and all of that. But there is that one stepdad who, like, the two teen daughters come back from one of the concerts. One of them goes to bed and decides to play strip chin with one of his daughter's friends. I'm just like,
Yeah,
guys,
it's
this is
like,
not American Beauty. Please stop.
but it's like the idea that this is the most shocking and titillating thing we can do, and it's just like this really uncomfortable man in his 50s going, "Are you sure you shouldn't go home?" And it's just there's just nothing shocking about it. Well, it helps that this is the classic thing where all the high school students look like they're pushing 35.
Yeah, exactly. Like in real life, they're probably fine, but just like my friend, 2024, we live in the age of stepdad
Yeah,
porn.
yeah,
We have seen things you people wouldn't believe.
yeah. It's true. Um, I also, one of the things that comes up is part of the reason why I think this is so streamlined is because writer director John Fasano, this was his second such film in a 2-year period. In '87, he directed Rock and Roll Nightmare, which is another movie about a struggling band trying to record an album in an isolated house that's haunted slash possessed. And that's something that happens in a lot of the movies we aren't covering here that I watch. That's just sort of like the thing. And that one is sort of famous because it was written and produced by John Meeke Thor, who's AKA sometimes just Thor. He's this Canadian bodybuilder, musician, entrepreneur who was recently well, not recently, 2015 documentary about him called I Am Thor. And I was going to watch Rock and Roll Horror to sort of jog my memory on it, but the only version available streaming was a Riffy Tracks dub.
Uh,
So I just decided not to. But it's sort of like this director did this other movie for this sort of weird man with a huge ego who wanted to build a movie around him and his bodybuilding and his guitar playing and stuff. And so he's like, I kind of like this idea. I'm going to go back to this and do it myself with this way.
I'm gonna do my own '80s satanic panic movie with blackjack and hookers.
Yeah, yeah, and rubbery monster, really ambitious. The monster at the end is not. It's clearly a man in a suit, but it is a very detailed suit.
Right, like it is very much like, on par with any random Buffy episode. But I mean, like,
Oh
this is
yeah,
also 10 years before
yeah.
Buffy,
I mean,
which
for
again,
'88,
yeah,
it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, there are theatrical releases with things like that. They're shot a little better usually to kind of cover it, but like, I don't know. You watch the original Hellraiser, and there's some monster effects in that aren't really that much better than these. It's just they're shot better.
yeah, the corridor monster is, yeah,
Exactly.
it's never like that has never worked for me, but the execution of it just makes it the most terrifying thing in the world. And
Exactly. That was
I
exactly
think
what I
the
was thinking
camera
about. Was
lighting would have been like, if this thing was on fire here, that would have been just like, yep, I'm in.
Yeah, but I mean, they have a lot going on. It's pretty impressive.
One disappointment though is just like they had this awesome shot at the beginning where it's just like these, like the entire band is just demons on stage.
And they don't turn back into those demons.
I know, right? And the demon mask looks so fucking cool
Yeah.
and so threatening, and they never go back to it. Like that's what I was waiting for the entire movie for them to turn
You know,
into
I
it.
kind of forgot about that. That was in my mind too, and I didn't write a note for that. But yeah, I was also waiting for it really just the singer turns into a monster. And
Right, and the rest of them keep playing during that entire
yeah.
time of fight. I mean, consummate professionals. Good for them, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's a good enough. So King Cobra, I looked into this. King Cobra is the backup band, and the lead singer is Marcy Black, who sings all the tracks, but is the one missing member, not playing herself. She's played by actor Sal Viviano, who isn't really in a lot else. He is pretty good at being a slime ball. I'm
yes,
surprised he didn't have a bigger career. Like he really feels like someone who would play the jerk in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie who gets killed, and you're like, "Oh, good, thank God that
it was
guy died."
very much giving me like a Christian Bale kind of vibe before
Yeah,
Christian Bale was even a thing. So
yeah,
yeah,
a little. Yeah,
good.
that I like that. Especially when he's doing Shaft and American Psycho, that kind of Christian
Yes.
Bale. Yeah, but Marcy Black came out as trans back in 1993
Oh wow.
and continued recording music as lead singer and a solo artist. And I was really impressed by that. You don't, but it was funny because I was trying to find. I thought that that Sal Viviano was the singer. And so I looked up Marcy Black and I'm like, there's just these pictures of this blonde woman. Like what is this guy? And then I'm like, oh, that is her. Okay, I get it now. But so I thought that was cool. And she's still around, she still does stuff. And then the King Cobra itself was reasonably high profile. They opened for Maiden and Kiss. And the other members that are appearing on screen are Mick Suida as lead guitarist, rhythm guitarist Álex Massey, Quiet Riot bassist Chuck Wright, and a keyboardist named Elliot Solomon. But the biggest star in the group is the Hall of Fame drummer Carmine Appice. I messed that up. It's actually Carmine Appice or Appice, but it seems like Appice is the preferred pronunciation. He was in Vanilla Fudge. He played with Pink Floyd. He's on a whole bunch of Rod Stewart albums. He has a co-writing credit on "Do You Think I'm Sexy,"
Oh
which I
wow.
guess we won't hold against him. But he's on a bunch of Sly Stone albums, which those are some good drums. And
Yeah.
he worked on a bunch of Marty Freeman, Megadeth guitarist Marty Freeman's solo albums. He toured with Ozzy Osbourne on the Bark on the Moon at the Moon tour, and he was part of a supergroup I've never heard of called Beck, Bogert, and Appice with Jeff Beck and Tim Bogert. And then he wrote a best-selling book on drum instructions. And according to the man himself, he was fired from Ozzy Osbourne's band specifically by Sharon Osbourne. Ozzy liked him, Sharon hated him.
Ah,
So I'm guessing he was kind of a prick because for all her faults, I feel like
she
Sharon was,
doesn't fire people just
yeah,
outright like that, especially if her husband likes him.
yeah, I feel like she was a good judge of professionalism at the very least. So the drummer guy who actually gets a couple feature, I think he even has a couple lines. He's got this kind of Tom Savini looking guy with this thin black mustache. He's really the most famous guy on stage during
Hmm.
those scenes. Yeah. So it's like a real band, and that's why the music was acceptably good. Not something you'd want to, if you're old like me, add to your iPod, or if you're younger, add to your Spotify. But I didn't hate the music. I thought it was all right.
Yep, solid 7 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
5 out of 10 pitchfork.
Yeah. Pitchfork rating, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, do you have anything else on this one?
Aside from the fact that Damien's final form looks kind of like a ghoulie, but other than that,
Oh
no.
yeah. And I actually thought that meant that the Ghoulies guy did him, but it was not. Like what is that guy's name? I should know his name. He actually directed a bunch of films, and he has a very specific style to his character designs. Ghoulies. Oh, he did the third one, I bet. Ghoulies in college. Ghoulies go to college. His name is John Carl Buechler, and yeah, he passed away not too long ago.
Oh,
But
that's a bummer.
he did a whole bunch of Full Moon and Empire things, and he did the special effects, and he just has a very specific monster face to his stuff that this monster kind of has. That's sort of like, that's not the best movie we're going to talk about, but I think that is the definitive movie we're going to talk about right there. So then we'll move on to what I think is the best movie we're going to cover, but which might be pushing the envelope of what counts as heavy metal horror, which is El Dia de la Bestia, or Day of the Beast, by Álex de la Iglesia from 1995. This is a personal favorite, and as soon as I realized I could shoehorn it in here, I went for it, which often ends up happening. I'm like, wait, this thing I love kind of counts. Aha. So I'll say the plot here. According to whoever writes these for Letterboxd, it revolves around a Basque Roman Catholic priest who is dedicated to committing as many sins as possible, a death metal salesman, and a Italian host of a TV show on the occult. These go on a literal trip through Christmas-time Madrid to hunt for and prevent the reincarnation of the Antichrist.
There is so much that is going on in that premise that I want to be separate movies.
Yeah. Once the core group gets together, this is such a good movie to me. Those three main guys, which are played by Álex Angulo, Armando de Raza, and Santiago Segura, who is a really famous Spanish actor and who I think a lot of Americans saw in Blade 2 as the guy who Blade lets live, and then right before the end of the movie.
That's where I know him from.
Yeah, so
he was just that guy who's just like, one, I first thought he was Jonathan Davis when he showed up on screen.
Right.
And when, like, the more I just kept watching, I'm just like, why do I know this asshole from someplace? And that was it.
Yeah, so I'm sure that Del Toro was making movies in Spain around the same time, and I'm sure that he saw this movie. And again, this guy was in a lot. He's he's pretty famous guy.
Yeah, he makes mention on Blade 2's commentary about, like, this scene comes and goes in American audiences just fine. Anytime he is shown it in a Spanish-speaking country, it's basically like I tried to torture the Jim Carrey of Spain.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, he's very famous, but so is De La Iglesia. This would have been only his second feature movie, and it was so hyped up in the early internet Fangoria gore zone back pages, kind of like there was so much hype surrounding this movie, and it didn't hit fucking US video until 99. I had to wait until I was in college to finally fucking see it.
Wow.
And now it's on UHD 4K, and yeah, you can get it easily, but man, it was impossible to find. But I guess I kind of wanted to set up that how big Spanish horror was worldwide at the time. It was really only eclipsed by the hype surrounding Japanese horror. And there was, there's Guillermo del Toro, who's Mexican, but he made his early, these horror movies in Spain. And then there are other ones who ended up being hyped up to the point where they made American movies or Hollywood movies, like Alejandro Amenabar, who did The Others. Del Toro did Mimic. Balaguerro did Darkness, the Anna Paquin one.
Oh yeah.
And this movie got De La Iglesia a American co-production called Perdida Durango, starring Rosie Perez and pre-American fame Javier Bardem. And that is another fantastic movie. It was all shot in Tucson. It's almost like if you want to see what Tucson looked like when I was in high school, watch this movie. Because they just wander around places I used to wander around. It's very surreal, but it was mishandled and severely edited, and then released in it was cut by 20 minutes or something as Dance with the Devil. So he never really got his chance at his big Hollywood movie. I think it would have been too weird anyway. And then since then he became a big name. He got one more English language movie. There was something called, I didn't see it, was called The Oxford Murders with Elijah Wood. And he has an HBO show called 30 Coins that I've heard is really good, and then have also not watched. This is like a real good, this is comparable with something like Dead Alive. This is a filmmaker who was still kind of doing do it yourself, but he had a bigger budget at his disposal at this point, and he's like feels like he's on his way to a Lord of the Rings level film that he just never quite really made.
For sure. And just like there's bits in here that like even by now standards, I'm just like, how the hell did they pull this off on this level of budget? Like there's that whole bit where like, they're trying to escape out the building and they're just kind of like shimmying along this electric sign.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is just straight up turned into like, one of those old school, like, Douglas Fairbanks hanging off of a clock gags. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, I did not see any of this going where it's going, but I really enjoyed it.
The thing about it is it's like his other movies. The thing that kind of makes it a quintessential De La Iglesia movie is that it does his thing where he likes to repackage old ideas in unique ways. And he has a lot of dark comedy, and he has he likes these sort of Baroque gothic horror visuals, and he's really culturally literate. He is a lot like Guillermo del Toro. That is the mainstream American ideal. He has a lot in common with del Toro, and there's something about the way he lets things just keep piling on and going places you're not ready for it to go that makes it quintessentially him. I think is that you're not sure, like the way it's introduced is just this priest who's like, I need to sin, I don't know how to sin, and he believes that if he sins enough it will stop the Antichrist, so he's just going around town doing things. And it's sort of like a Monty Python gag. It starts like a Monty Python thing, like a sweet-natured, naive man of the cloth must learn sin, and he has the help of a misfit record store clerk, and then a charlatan spiritualist. Like that just sounds like a setup for a Monty Python skit that then just ends there. But they actually do save the world from the rebirth of the birth of the Antichrist in the end. Well, we think it's kind of, I guess it's a little open ended at the end.
It sounds like they did, and that's the thing, because so much of, especially the climax, goes right for like, okay, we need to get into serious mode immediately, and it almost doesn't jive with the rest of the film. It's so like grim all of
Yeah,
a sudden.
it's really unexpected because like I don't know enough about Spanish politics, especially during this era. Like I know a little bit about the fascist era, but I don't really know what was going on in the 90s. And I'm not convinced it was designed to make any specific political statement, but it sort of just conveys mistrust of spiritual guides and mistrust of religion. But it's also just sort of having fun subverting rules of like zealotry and dogma. And I think a lot of things that happen in this are not specifically like there's scenes of these arbitrarily abusive cops, and I don't think that that's like an ACAB's kind of statement. I think that's just supposed to show us that the Antichrist's power is rising, and it's just making people more violent in general. I think that he's making really generalized statements, and it's also like you said, it feels like it's from another movie because the record store Satanist becomes like, he's not born again, but he becomes the hero for God. He's one of three heroes of God, and he he really buys all in to helping out in the end. So I mean,
Also,
it's
I just because it's my favorite musical ever, just it warmed my heart that like his whole thing was just like, wow, you really are a man of the cloth. Have you ever seen Jesus Christ Superstar? You know that song Hosanna?
oh yeah, I have a note on that. I tried to research that. So yeah, she's remembering the fact that Satan is being brought back with this really strange building that is this sort of like arched twin towers is the best way to
And I
put it.
never looked up whether that's a real thing or
It
not.
is. And this is
Oh,
way, I mean, this is way before the 9/11, so it has nothing to do with that. There's a making of documentary that comes along, and they don't really get into specifics, but everybody in the making of documentary keeps saying something about like, oh, and then there's the Puerta de Europa towers, and ugh, I mean, everybody sees that, and we know what that is, and like nobody was really saying what is it? You need to tell me. I'm ignorant. I don't know what happened. But there was like, I understood that there was some meaning in that becoming Satan's temple, and so I looked it up. And well, again, I thought it was because it looked like devil horns, but part of it was that it was available because it was still under construction. But the basic version of the story I got is that this was a building being made in 1989, and it was initially built by a Kuwaiti company, but there was a major embezzlement scandal, and so they had to change companies, and it was delayed, and it sat there, and so it started being built in 89, and here we are in 95, and it's still not done.
Oh wow.
So from what I gathered, it's sort of both an eyesore. Well, these days not anymore, but at the time it would have been an eyesore and a just giant monolith to political corruption.
Oh.
So that was one thing I like. Yeah, he knew what he was doing there, but that was the best I can gather. And I assume there are people who were alive and adults at the time who would say, no, it was actually even more. There was something else involved, or like more companies. I wouldn't be surprised if American companies were involved in it too. And then like another little factoid is that they went to Pedro Almodovar like to kind of lend his name as an executive producer, and even him, even the like guy who makes all these controversial queer movies, even he was like, something about making a Satan movie. I just don't think I want to do that. That's how Catholic Spain is that even non-Catholics, even people who don't like Catholicism are like, let's not poke that bear. Let's just yeah.
Yeah, which makes the fact that like the first 30 seconds are a priest being crushed by a giant frost. That
Yeah.
probably like I wonder how many walkouts there were for just
Yeah. I
that.
mean, that's true. Who knows how much this actually offended people? You get a feeling in the documentary that it was pretty controversial, but that people understood it was supposed to be a dark comedy too, so it got away with some stuff. I mean, if you watch any Latin American or Spanish horror, it tends to either fall into the puritanically pro-Catholic angle or the angry super anti-Catholic angle. And so I think it's kind of interesting that this one sort of is like, well, we're not anti-Catholic, we're just anti um charlatan, I guess is the way to put it.
Right, which is my one disappointment about it because the second they brought up just I need to sin in order to learn more about the Antichrist, I thought what we were getting was just kind of like on a Spanish crank. We're just
Oh,
like
that's
if
yeah.
this guy doesn't sin enough within the next couple of days, he's gonna die or something.
Yeah, there is like maybe the first 10 minutes of the movie kind of feel like they're going to go that way. 10,
Because he's
15 minutes.
just so manic about like I need to sin, I need to become more evil. Why am I not learning more about evil? But the fact that his first destination is to try and like listen to all the death metal he can because this is where all the Satan comes from
Right.
is hilarious still. But
And
at least
and
he had good taste.
that's the only thing that really makes it a heavy metal horror movie, other than the fact that the Satan is a pretty gnarly Satan that actually when it shows up it's pretty cool and pretty metal, but
Yeah, we will have to get that. But just yeah, like the fact that he walks in the very first album he goes for is like, oh yeah, he has it written down as Napalm Death because obviously nobody pronounced it correctly when they
yeah.
told what the band was. But again, they went for Napalm Death and just like you know what, good, someone had good taste. Good job.
Yeah, I mean that big band in 1995, holy shit.
Right.
Napalm Death and Cannibal Corpse were where it was at for those guys.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised they didn't go for that because if you're gonna go again, the problem with the previous two movies is if you want me to believe that Satan is going to come out of the ground and ruin the earth, the song you want is going to be the one that's like about hammer smash faces and whatnot,
Hmm.
not whatever the hell the Roses were singing about, Soldier of the Devil or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I suppose in this case, part of the point is that the Satan music is actually has nothing to do with it, and he is misunderstood, and that the moral panics have pushed him the wrong way.
Yeah,
Um,
they're just like sitting there having a mosh pit, having a good time. That's not where the evil's coming from.
no,
Also, it must be said as a side note, what was with the early 90s and the fact that every hard rock metal concert had to have one chick dancing on top of a table?
I don't know what that is about. The thing in Arizona, as someone who didn't like mosh pits and would kind of stand on the edge of them, the gag, the joke, the thing that sounds like an untrue stereotype that was always true is there was always one really big, tall Native American guy in every pit. It was just the way it was. And nobody would mess with him. And it was not always the same guy, but there was always at least one guy just standing in the pit where everybody else going around him.
Yeah,
It's Arizona
most of the
thing.
shows, most of the shows I've been to, it wasn't native, but like there's always just that one guy who's just sort of like, your job is to bounce against him.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some
And
reason, it was
sadly,
always a
like
native guy.
me being 6'8", like I'm usually that guy.
Right.
So if I
That's a
haven't seen him in the pit, it's because I've been that guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason I don't like pits is just because I've always been tall. I've not always been big and overweight. I was very skinny, but I was tall, so I became such a I would get plowed into all the time, and I just did not have the bone structure to take it. I'm not as tall as you are, but I'm above average height. So, and I was my height when I was pretty young. So you go to a teenager show, I was definitely tall for teenager.
Yeah, every pit at this point is my physical fitness check for the year. Just like
Yeah.
if I can survive being slammed into by some dude who decided to go wheeling around the pit for a second, I'm in pretty good shape. I should be okay. Like I knew I need to get back to the gym when like somebody took a head or two into me at a Slayer concert, and I was just like, oh shit, my ankle. I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, back to the gym for me. It's time. It needs to be leg day.
A lot of core strength too to not get shoved over.
Yeah, like your center of gravity needs to be very low. Your legs need to be at like a perfect angle, or else you're just gonna get toppled over.
The thing is that I talked about this at length. Then I ended up cutting it all out of the podcast. But like, I was really into the ska scene when I was in high school, the punk ska scene, and for some reason, it was really big in the Southwest.
Hmm.
And the problem there, which we would have talked about if we would have gone into Green Room, is that all the local skinheads love ska music. So their version of a pit, like the skank hole, I don't know what you even call it, the dancing area, would become really violent because even if they're the anti-racist type of skinheads, they're still skinheads and they just want to cause damage and fight. And so I just learned to stop doing anything.
Which all that would be surprising, but again, like I live in Massachusetts, and the Dropkick Murphys
Oh
have
yeah.
a reputation of if they even see a single fucking red lace at their show, their lead singer will jump off and escort you out personally.
I actually went to college with a guy from Boston right when Dropkick Murphys were sort of getting their national appeal. And yeah, he was really militant about that kind of stuff. It was,
Yeah, like again, like they're the Dropkick Murphys. They basically play for drunk. They basically play for St. Patrick's Day all year.
yeah.
But their lead singer, like the entire band, is just they are vehemently pro. Like they're pro worker. They're pro alternate sexualities. Everybody. They do
Yeah.
not fuck around with people at their shows.
Yeah, and that's the thing is the skinheads aren't necessarily that. That's the last thing I actually want to talk about with this movie is that the metal part of it is this guy and the Seguera character, and he has this authenticity to him that is I don't know if this is still the case with people these days, but back when alternative rock was really picking up and you get a lot of CD stores that would have like imports and stuff like that, there was always a guy like him at most of these stores, and he wasn't necessarily the main guy. He wasn't like the guy running the shop, but he was this guy who's just sort of annoying, but he's so passionate and genuine, and he really does want you to learn about the music he loves, that I just think there's authenticity to the character, that this sort of mid 90s metalhead guy who just wants to share what he does.
And yeah, absolutely. Like I love this guy immediately just for being again, like whoever like wrote him or just the performance in general, like they did their homework. He just feels like that person hanging out in a record shop saying, "No, no, 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 no! Don't pick up the Limp Bizkit album. Here's Fishbone. Learn where they come from. It's gonna be
Mhm.
okay. Come back when you're done with that. I got more for you." Like that dude.
He's kind of he's kind of an antidote to the character Jack Black plays in High Fidelity.
Right. Or he's not trying to gatekeep the music. He's just sort of
Right.
like, "Oh shit, you have good taste. Well, come on back. We got more for you." And again, I feel like that's, and this is me going on old man rant here at this point, but just like I feel like that guy is missing from culture.
Hmm.
where you just like you had that one person who like he is your gateway to everything cool and will keep that with you, as long as you want to keep going back to him.
I definitely had guys like that when I got into horror movies. Guys who were like, "Oh, so you're into this? Okay, like check this out. If you did watch this, here's a list. Here's a list of things to look for next time you're at the
It's
video
weird because
store."
I kind of didn't get that until like maybe the early 2000s, like when I started going to websites and whatnot.
Hmm.
But also just like it felt like that guy just didn't come to my area until like the internet was a thing and like now everybody had access to stuff. 'Cause I feel like a lot of like the early horror movies that I was watching, a lot of it was like, okay, so when you go back home and you go to LimeWire, here's where you're going to look
Hmm.
for.
I mean, there was like when I was getting into horror, like the first my high school years was all home video and trying to go all over town without a driver's license to find the places that would rent them to me, or just flat out buying the tapes if I found them somewhere. And then when I get to college, then DVD hits and companies are like, we need to put out whatever we can on DVD. So then suddenly all that stuff got a lot easier to see, and it sort of changed everything. Um, and I think that there's some truth to what you're saying, that there's that, like, we're missing that toll bridge troll who's telling us about the cool things we missed.
Right.
And the early internet was definitely more about just look at these things, whereas I mean, there's so much stuff just available at this point that how are you going to make up your mind what to watch or what to listen to?
Right. And just again, like I think the movie does a really good job of just like introducing you to this guy who's just passionate about his thing.
Yeah,
And when he finds out all the imagery from his album covers was real, he's just equally excited about like, getting on board with that.
yeah, yeah. I think that the difference is I think that overall, without knowing a lot of young people, I know some young people, but I think that people are more open to different styles of things. I think that there are always going to be shitty snobs, and snobbery is one of the things that made me stop listening to just punk rock. Is that punk rock snobs are just awful. I mean, there were
Or
heavy metal
yeah.
snobs, but Jesus, punk rock. It's punk rock. Why are you being a snob? Yeah. And, um, but I think that people are a little more like they enjoy it, eclectic taste. They like the idea of someone who like when I was in high school, you liked two kinds of music, and if you liked hip hop and metal, like people would think you were weird. Like they would be like, "What are you, like a poser? What are you trying to do here?" Whereas that's just not that big a deal, or even a big deal at all these days. There's so many genres that have opened up. I think it's an advantage in the long run.
Right. And that's how you kind of run into this thing now where just like there's really not a whole lot of separation in between the genres anymore.
Hmm.
Like it's positive and negative because like on one hand you do have stuff like you have like Sleep Token out there, which just God, the number of girls that just were like, I want to have sex to this music so much. And I'm just like, so they're a metal band, right? And he's like, yeah, but like, I mean, listen to it and just, yeah, this is absolute pretzel music if there ever was. I totally see it. But at the same time, like the flip side is you have something like Bring Me the Horizon, who started as a metal band and now they're just straight like a trap, like rap band at this
Yeah,
point.
which
Like
has got to be
so far.
disappointing. It's got to be. I mean, I don't really know them that well, but that's got to be a disappointing feeling.
It really is because again, like they did have like this kind of unique voice in metal, and that unique voice has taken them to just become like landed out at every single edge that they ever had.
It's a lot more extreme than something like I've always been a big Tom Petty fan, and Tom Petty had his one electronic album, but it still sounds like Tom Petty, just with more keyboard, with more synthesizers. It's like it's not a huge difference between like, and in fact, if you showed a 25-year-old the greatest hits album, they wouldn't even be able to tell you when the electronic era was, probably.
Right.
But yeah,
And
just
I
not
think
total.
fans are a little bit more accepting of it, but it also depends on like what direction the shift goes to.
Well, okay, now that I mean, do you have anything else to say on
Um,
Dia de los Bestia?
this one not so much. Again, like it's a mix of genres, and I think they could go harder on any one of them and have like a really awesome movie. But
Hmm.
for what it is, it's very good. And I don't know. I was surprised by how grim it got in the end, but at the same time, it feels very kind of John Constantine at the end
Yeah, it
in a
does.
way that I really liked, and especially just did not expect from where this was prior to
Misfits,
that.
John Constantine, that kind of misfits versus ultimate evil kind of thing.
Exactly. Where it's just like, I'm a guy that has like a vial of holy water and like, a cigarette, and I have to fight off Satan.
Yeah.
That kind of vibe.
De La
So the,
Iglesia could do a good John Constantine. I know that Del Toro has talked about doing a Justice League Dark movie forever, but
yeah,
maybe he
and
should hand
he
it
would
off
have
in
crushed
parts.
it.
It will never
Yeah.
happen, but
Well, you never know. James Gunn is a little bit more permissive about this, and we'll
yeah,
see if they get involved or not. But we'll
we'll see. I don't have a lot of faith in the people above James Gunn to not
see.
just pull the
Exactly.
plug after 2 movies.
But yeah, overall, I did really like this one. It was just surprising in ways I did not expect.
Yeah, I mean, I would compare a lot of the Spanish horror and sort of dark drama from this era to a lot of the South Korean horror and dark drama from the era, where they
Yeah.
really cut between tones without a lot of warning. And they really like to get Baroque. They love Baroque.
Yeah. Speaking of cutting between genres,
Okay.
yeah.
Have you? So this the last one we'll talk about here is Wild Zero, which I think is the Japanese name. This is from 1999. This is directed by Tetsuro Takeuchi. Had you seen this before?
This is one of the few that, yes, I had seen
Okay.
half of this back in the early 2000s when it was just kind of that, oh, it's from Japan, it's got to be good. That
Yeah,
whole era. And
and it
even
had a
by those
decent
standards,
DVD. Yeah, it had a decent
yeah.
DVD release, and actually it came out right when Netflix mail-in thing was really big. I think that's how a lot of people saw it.
Oh,
I kind
wow.
of almost forgot that was a thing until this exact second that we
Yeah, I mean,
used to
like,
get.
yeah, that's funny because I remember I got this because someone burned a CD with the file on it for me,
There you
which is
go.
how long lived that was.
This one has a very funny nondescript, and not that you can really narrow this movie down, but the letterbox thing says only legendary Japanese garage rock band Guitar Wolf can stand between a race of aliens and stand between a race of aliens from this see now somebody needs to this is the syntax is all wrong. I'll read exactly what's written. Only legendary Japanese garage rock band Guitar Wolf can stand between a race of aliens from destroying the Earth with an army of zombies. Let's just say that's. I'm gonna preface this one like I was saying how big Spanish horror was. Well, Japanese horror was the biggest thing in the basically once Ringu comes out, suddenly everybody like, oh shit, we got to get our Japanese horror is the new thing. We got to get in on the ground floor here, and so you end up with a lot of movies that are made for the Japanese video market, which is crazier than our already weird video market in America, and you get this sort of series like you basically mostly have ghost stories like Ringu and The Grudge and those things, but every once in a while there'd be these weird things that are like homages to the Evil Dead and stuff like that. And so the movies that all kind of came out at once that I ended up seeing on bootleg DVD were Ryuhei Kitamura's Verses, which is I
Yeah.
think the one most people saw.
Yes.
um, Atsushi Muroga's Junk, which might be the worst of all of them, and Naoyuki Tomomatsu's Stacy Attack of the Zombie Schoolgirls. And I think given that this movie Wild Zero was actually filmed in Thailand, I think it's fair to include the Thai film SARS Wars, which is a title that really really, I mean, like it was timely at the time, but now post COVID, it's like, ugh, don't name your movie that.
Yeah.
And the Hong Kong film Bio Zombie by Wilson Yip, which was a zombie romantic comedy 6 years before Shaun of the Dead, and it's a pretty good movie on its own. Though, of course, we just thinking about Dead Alive, Brain Dead, 1992, Peter Jackson. That's really the first zombie romantic comedy. But I do want to emphasize that Wild Zero, which was released among all these others, has a very, very sincere love story at its heart.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you have to get past the one problematic bit of it where it's just sort of like, oh, that hasn't aged well in 2024. But once you get past that, it's just like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, let's we'll set the stage here, and because there is a fascinating problematic thing that goes on in this movie. I'm pretty sure, and then you can probably back me up on this one. I think that we can credit or blame Resident Evil for Japan's sudden interest in zombies around this time.
yep, pretty much. That kind of started it. And to be honest, I mean, that game is kind of like Blade to what would end up being like the zombie craze of like the early 2000s. Like,
Hmm. And
it,
well, and as I remember it, this movie has two main characters who are love interests, Ace and Tobio, they meet at a gas station, and that has to be a Resident Evil 2 reference, right? Like, it really it seems like they were going for Resident Evil 2, but I haven't played the original in such a long time. I don't remember if I'm just confusing the original Resident Evil 2 with the remake that came out.
nope, the original did start with like this weird little vignette. It's just you couldn't play it in the original. So
Okay.
it would make sense that maybe there might be a little bit of that in there.
Cuz like Resident Evil 2 was it was before 99, so that they would have had it in mind. It was like what, 98
It was
maybe?
98, yeah.
Yeah, that feels right. I think that of those movies I mentioned, that Wild Zero aged the best because it's not too long. And like, if anybody who's seen Versus knows, it's a good time, but holy shit, it's more than 2 hours long, and that there's no reason for it to be that long. Um, and it's not locked into being a comedic homage to George Romero. It's sort of its own wacky thing.
It's just
And
like
it
every 30 seconds, some new like story is being told. It doesn't all hang together, but every single one of them is weird and funny in its own right.
and like it could be taking place in 1960, 1980, 1999. Like, it's not it I'm definitely cheating by calling this a heavy metal, because there is one background death metal song that you can barely make out that's being played when they're driving in the car. But
Yeah,
for the we,
it's not metal, but at the same time, like the energy is right.
yeah, I mean, it's I would call Guitar Wolf is the name of the band. I would call Guitar Wolf punkabilly. They call themselves jet rock and roll, but it's sort of like the Ramones meets the Misfits, but with a rockabilly kind of edge to it. And there's a lot of additional music from other bands that's rockabilly.
Yep, that sounds about right. And just like again, that whole Japanese boom at the beginning of the 2000s, I remember them like it was like them, Duran Gray, a couple others, where just like there was just all this Japanese music all of a sudden running around,
Hmm.
and I remember them just being like kind of at the forefront of just like, well, they dress like they're in Greece, but they
Yes.
sound like the dirtiest like garage rock band you've ever heard, and intentionally so. Like, a lot of the songs sound like, oh God, what happened to the sound on the movie? No, 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 no. That's just how they sound.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like suddenly the music is being recorded through a loudspeaker instead of a microphone.
Right.
I'm trying to remember the name. There was a Japanese band that did a lot of covers of Misfits songs that I had. Oh, I think Balzac. But they're a cool band that got more and more metal as they kind of outgrew the Misfits kind of
Hmm.
straight punk thing, power pop thing. They're a cool band, and they're more like, if you want hard Japanese music from this age, I would look into Balzac.
Yeah, but
Balzac.
well, also again, like you had Duran Gray around there, which like
Mhm.
they knew their role almost entirely. Like all the drama, like basically like Duran Gray is the reason you have Devil May Cry as a series. Like that is
Yeah.
exactly the vibe they had, and they played up to it like you wouldn't believe.
Now, and I guess an anime has a lot of metal influence in their music now too. Like, holy shit, that second Attack on Titan, it might be the third. I don't remember. It's been a while. But one of the opening titles of Attack on Titan is one of the better metal songs. I
Yeah,
can't
like
remember.
so. There's always been that like not entirely inaccurate joke that just like Japan's musical culture is always 10 years behind
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And just when all this was coming out, like they were just getting out of like their kind of late 80s phase of music, like going into like grunge and like industrial and heavy metal. And what I didn't realize until I actually watched this movie just this year was the movie Streets of Fire.
Mm.
Like it was a huge flop here, but it was massive in Japan to the
Mm.
point where just like a lot of their pop culture coming out of like the late 80s, all of it had some element from Streets of Fire in it. Like the game Final Fight, like they literally have a dude in like t-shirt and jeans named Cody,
Mm-hmm.
and his girlfriend is literally just Diane Lane from that movie. Like it's that level of entrenched in Japanese pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
So like even with stuff like this, where like you have Guitar Wolf, but like a lot of their stuff is because Streets of Fire just brought this kind of like grungy greaser kind of vibe to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So like yeah, they look like they're from the 1950s, but they also seem like the most badass motherfuckers on the planet, and it's a lot owed to that movie.
I want to say it's not very important here, but the members of Guitar Wolf are Guitar Wolf, Bass Wolf, and Drum Wolf. I don't know what their real names are, but that's what they got. Bass Wolf died not too long ago, so
Oh,
rest
that's a
rest in
bummer.
peace, Bass Wolf.
That's the best algorithmic name since again baby metal has the same thing going on where it's just like it's Sue metal, Momo metal,
Yeah,
Moa metal.
got to keep it simple.
Right.
But it does remind me of the Ramones, where they all changed their last name to Ramon unofficially and that kind of thing. Leather jackets. This is so. I think that our anarchic. How do you say that?
Anarchic.
Anarchic is a good way to describe it. And so that plot implied that Guitar Wolf are the main characters, and they really aren't. It's it's so loosely plotted that I have a feeling that they didn't have a working script, that they just wrote scenes on the day and sort of structured it in a way that can sometimes be really frustrating if you're trying to approach it like a normal movie. You kind of have to just go zen with it and let it sort of lack of rhythm. It has some really weird fade outs of all things. Like a scene will fade out like it's a commercial break or something all of a sudden. It's just weird stylistic choices. And I
I
think,
personally love the bit at the gas station where it's Ace and like this the actual lead guy who's like again greaser dude riding a motorcycle,
yeah,
and the girl he saves at a gas station. And when it fades out, I mean, like it is straight up like dating ad from the 80s, kind of like
yeah,
fading out into cartoon hearts, kind of.
yeah. I mean, I guess maybe advertising. I didn't think of it that way, but it is sort of like late 90s advertising that you would get on MTV, or even more during kids stuff. It's kind of edited like a fucking cereal commercial from the 90s. uh,
That's
just
accurate, actually.
I didn't I that you bring that up, that's kind of, it doesn't have the same slickness. It's definitely like, I have a feeling this can't even come out on, like, I don't think this could be in HD. It's never come out on Blu-ray. But I don't think it was shot using HD cameras. I think it was shot using earlier digital video cameras, and that DVD quality is the best it's ever going to look.
It's one of those movies where just like I don't think 4K would do it any favors. There's no use in trying. Like I had to
No.
watch this on YouTube because it's not streaming anywhere.
Yeah, it's gone. It's sort of gone, and it's nice that it's on YouTube.
Which I mean, it must be said. Like I do appreciate that YouTube has become like this weird repository for like, oh, there's no disc and nobody knows who the license holder is. Well, guess what?
And then you just keep uploading it every time somebody
Yep.
finally. I think what they were going for here was a sort of ensemble cast, Pulp Fiction colliding stories, retro throwback thing. I'm sure that I haven't read any contemporary reviews, but I'm sure someone called it Pulp Fiction meets Mars Attacks, and then just didn't watch the rest of the movie. And then Christine rightfully pointed out that From Dusk Till Dawn was probably another big influence, and I completely forgot about the impact of From Dusk Till Dawn at the time. But yeah,
Yeah,
there.
I had a video in my recommendations after I had watched it from someone who even pointed out that like one of the side stories involving these three criminals on the run, like literally they found a dude who looks like Japanese Steve Buscemi.
Yeah. Well, and they also there's a sort of military. They don't really say what her job is, if she's with the military or if she's a survivalist. I'm not sure. She seems to belong to some sort of underground group, but she has the same tribal tattoo that Clooney has from Dusk Till Dawn. It's just much much smaller on her arm. One person that people might recognize here is the actor. I'm gonna probably butcher this name, but Yoshiyuki Morishita. He ended up in Kill Bill Volume 1 as this creepy, gross salaryman that Gogo Yajirobe guts in her flashback. He plays this just failed Buscemi-like criminal in Wild Zero.
Oh, yeah. No, now I remember. Yeah.
Tarantino would have been prepping Kill Bill around this time, so
He
it seems
absolutely
likely that
cast
he,
her because of this. Yeah.
yeah, it seems likely to me because this, I mean, again, it had a pretty big DVD release, so it was on people's minds, and I can just picture Tarantino looking for anything that he hasn't seen before that's new when he's
Yeah,
in.
this would have been Tarantino bait at the time. And this is
Yeah,
like, what, 3-4 years before Kill Bill? Just,
yeah.
yeah, he absolutely saw this.
I wrote here. My note is that for a lot of the movie, Guitar Wolf is sort of a Greek chorus that is also a Deus Ex Machina, and also Guitar Wolf himself acts as Ace's Jiminy Cricket, and I don't think that's literal. I don't think he's literally appearing. I think that this is just what Ace is going on inside Ace's mind personified. I don't think that the idea is the real Guitar Wolf is coming to him and giving him life advice.
Yeah, like when they actually show up on the scene, they're actually in the scene. But like for the most part, we're just like he's looking to Guitar Wolf because he's just so cool,
Yeah, and they
and
have like
rightfully so.
they have a way of calling him with like a special dog whistle, which is fun. Ace needs our help, and
Also,
I
I love
should,
that he just keeps yelling at him, "Ace, what are you doing?
yeah, Ace.
Ace!"
Um, I want to reiterate that it's tonally and structurally a potentially very frustrating movie because it's just never wants to be one thing. It just doesn't want to. And so I could see people watching this and going, why are you suggesting this? But I was surprised how much it still appealed to me. I really was afraid I would watch this after having not seen it for 20 years and it would be like, like, ugh, this is definitely 1999 Gabe crap and he's not into this anymore. Before we get to the problematic stuff, I do want to emphasize that there are lots of gory zombie kills, but they're never like unpleasant. They're like fun gore, like cartoonish. The music is like wall to wall to the point where it's like they forgot to turn the radio off while they were filming. It's just always music playing. And at one point, Guitar Wolf uses electrified guitar picks like ninja stars.
Yes, which is just my favorite bit in the movie.
The band is constantly combing back their pompadours or whatever you want to call their haircuts every time they kill a zombie. Like Bass Wolf and Drum Wolf are sort of like their whole thing is to look cool, not really have very many lines, and then comb their hair. There's custom motorcycles that shoot flames out their exhaust points, pipes. And one of the borderline problematic things that I actually really like is that the Yakuza baddie wears hot pants. And it's sort of like it feels a little bit like a gay joke, but like as the movie goes on, he's not gay. He actually is like a misogynist, like rapist. But there's something just really amusing about this evil Yakuza guy who's always in women's hot pants. It's just really, it's a really fun thing. There's something about Japanese movies, the really transgressive movies, and you see it a lot in early Takashi Miike films where homosexuality is used as a shock tactic, and you're never really sure where the filmmakers stand on the subject of it. But so they're just using it as a shock tactic. It's like, and so that will lead us to the element that's the thing that happens, and I'm just going to spoil this for you because it happens pretty early in the movie. Is that uh, Tabuya or Tabuya, whatever her name is,
W.
Tobio. Tobio is a trans woman. They obviously don't use that language here, but when her and Ace are first making out, she strips and there is an implied penis shot. And he runs away and he hides, and then she gets attacked and has to run away from zombies. And he has this whole, and like you're like, oh fuck, they're going to turn this into transphobic. This is going to turn into Ace Ventura all of a sudden.
Mm.
But I think that it's like immediately his Jiminy Cricket Guitar Wolf guy is like, I can't remember what the line is. It's a repeated line where, oh yeah, love has no borders, nationalities or genders.
Right.
And it's like that's like pretty damn progressive for what it is. And as soon as he realizes she's in trouble, he spends the rest of the movie fighting zombies, almost dying, trying to get back to her and help her. And it's never brought up by any of the other characters. And at the end of the movie, he just is accepted her, and they're a couple now. And so it feels like it's going to be bad. It definitely feels like it's going to be bad because there's definitely a haha she has a penis joke, but it goes unexpected places, and I kind of appreciate it for based on what it is.
Yeah, that doesn't always happen in Japanese media where they'll just play the transness for a joke. And
Mm-hmm.
again, bringing this back to my wheelhouse, like literally the last Persona game that came out actually had a whole like actually not even Persona, but this goes back to their previous game, Catherine, which there's a character who's like, this hot redhead who has been giving just amazing advice the entire game. And you find out in the third act that she's trans, and all of a sudden it's a big deal that like somebody slept with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the end of it, it's more the big point that just everybody knows this person and who gives a shit like what she has between her legs. She's
Yeah.
just a great human being. And the same thing happens with Persona. And again, seeing this happen back in 90, like I thought like it was more of a modern thing in Japan where it's just sort of like, oh, they're more accepting of trans people. And then this happened. And I was just like, well, obviously someone's been trying to fight that fight for a very long time and just
Yeah.
didn't have the language we have for it now.
And I don't know, there's something to be said, like I don't know about the modern misfits, but I can't imagine Glenn Danzig sticking up for trans people in a movie. And it's like this isn't the only there's a whole history of bands in movies, like my bigger point being that a band around this time of their genre, one wouldn't necessarily expect Guitar Wolf to be like, hey, let's have a pro. They probably saw it as a pro queer message and like homosexual message at the time. Again, it's hard to judge where people are coming from at the time, but the fact that they did it at all is just really
Mhm.
surprising. Like, God, the Ramones, you don't want Ramones touching this. You got assholes in the Ramones. They, other than Joey, like there are some really homophobic lyrics in Ramones
Oh,
songs.
for sure.
It's so like it's just I don't know. It's interesting on a lot of levels that it's like because again, taking it back to Kashi Miike, some of his movies, like there's one I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, where part of the big shock is that the lead yakuza guy is gay and he rapes men, and it's just for shock. It's not a case of, yeah, sometimes bad guys are gay too, but it's like that's part of his evil. And you
Right.
now expect a lot more from a filmmaker like that, but at the time it really stands out to me.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we were just starting to have these conversations.
Hmm.
And again, you just didn't like the whole thing about Japanese film becoming popular around that time because they were doing the things that American film just wasn't.
Yeah.
And just again, the fact that that level of transgression was also leading to like just progression in general. Again,
Hmm.
a nice touch that I didn't expect again.
And it was really a weird coincidence that I didn't put together that there were like the fact that the lead singer of Black Roses came out as trans way back in the early 90s. It's just weird coincidence, but at the same time you like that's metal music.
Right. Just like doing having full control over your own body and your own sexuality is part and parcel with all of it. You can't really do like like conservative metal exists. I
Yeah.
mean, like
Yeah.
this is why Finger Death Punch has a career,
Yeah.
but at the
But
same time, like just the best of it is always going to be transgressive in that way.
I mean just like even look at the mainstream. If you look at that one album cover for Motley Crue where they just look like attractive women. I remember being a kid and that just confusing me at the time.
The one that always sticks out to me is the fact that like when Deftones were first starting out, I mean, like they just sounded like straight up just skate kids doing like
Yeah.
a trashy album. And their second album, like you would have Chino Moreno doing these interviews where he's just like, no, quite literally, I wanted to sound more like a woman on this one. I wanted a female vibe to this that no one else was doing. And that album to this day sounds like nothing else that came out that period.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess we're ending this podcast on a heavier note than I intended, because I pushed this back to the end. But I don't know. I think it's appropriate. I think it's interesting to look at like rock and roll horror movies, and I mean, if we take it back to the first two movies that usually get brought up are Phantom of the Paradise and Rocky Horror, which are absolutely gender bending stories. So I think it really is part of it.
Yeah, because like I mean, horror movies in general are there to transgress. So I mean, it
Mhm.
just kind of marries very well with heavy metal trying to do the same thing. It was just very interesting, just going back to these ones from the '80s, where what they could do to transgress was look the part of just like a queer metal band, but not
Mhm.
actually like indulging in everything else along with it. But then by the time the '90s roll around, you just have like this very different vibe of just sort of like, we've gone as far as we can go with like, worshiping Satan and whatnot. We're going to have to transgress in a different way. And that's where they spread out to.
Mhm. Yeah, people only take Satan worship seriously for so long, with the
Right. And
exception of fundamentalists. But most of the general public is like, whatever. At a certain point, when it comes to Satan
yeah,
worship.
like, I mean, like one of my favorite bands at the moment is Behemoth. And like, they are dead ass serious about like, not wanting to like be down on Christianity, but just sort of like we worship no gods and Satan is the ultimate embodiment of freedom and all that shit.
Hmm.
But even then, everyone's just sort of like, "Yep, uh huh. Well, that's cool. Anyway,
That's
what's
cool.
on
That's
TV?"
sweet in
Like,
a way.
yeah, like that's
Yeah,
almost a throwback. Good for y'all. Just
yeah, it's
it's
true.
a very different thing to try and transgress in the 21st century than it was in the '80s and '90s.
Who knows if that pendulum will swing back the other way? You can never quite guess these things. All right, I guess that's all I got here. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a lot of final thoughts. This is just something I should continue looking into, because again, it's still around. There was a movie not too long ago called Deathgasm that got a lot of play. I didn't love it, but people really liked that one.
I
So
mean, just the title alone sounds fantastic.
yeah, yeah. But I don't know. You have any other final thoughts here, or should we wrap it up?
Nope. I have meddled out for the time being, so
All
I'm
right,
good.
cool. All right. Well, then I can be or where can you be reached? Are you still on anything these days?
Am I still on anything these days? Well, regrettably, I do still have a Twitter. I'm still there at Justin of Clark. It's mostly all, I mean, it is all my work at this point,
Yeah,
just nothing else.
exactly.
But
Same.
yeah, but I've actually moved over to Blue Sky where it's my reviews, plus also, like, for the most part, just ranting about wrestling every once in a while because it's
Hmm.
really good right at this particular moment. But yeah, I'm over on Blue Sky, same username, Justin of Clark Social, whatever it is over there. And for the most part, yeah, I'm still on Slant Magazine. I can
Slant.
still be found on GameSpot, and yeah.
Did you have any recent stuff that I should link in the description of this?
I did just review Monkey Man, which came out this weekend, so
All
there is
right. Okay.
that.
The
Which
short
is
version, was it good?
short version, yeah, it takes a little bit to get going, but
Okay.
and actually full circle moment because we were talking about just how transgressive it is just for queer audiences, especially in Asian countries.
Hmm.
That movie ends with the most badass fucking metal as fuck moment. And it involves Dev Patel's character teaming up with a veritable gang of trans warriors against
Awesome.
like this Indian triad set to I don't know who the fuck the band was, but they are shredding during this. It's beautiful. It's so damn good. Like moment of the year so far good.
Awesome. That sounds great. I can still be reached at like Justin. I still have Gabe M as a Matthew Powers on Twitter and a Genre Grinder Twitter, but I really only use those for links to the reviews and the podcast. And I am on Blue Sky and Instagram Instagram, Genre Grinder Gabe. Blue Sky got there early enough to just be plain old Gabe Powers. None of the other Gabe Powerses in the world beat me to it. I imagine there are more Justin Clarks than there are Gabe Powerses, but there are a surprising
Probably.
number of Gabe Powerses. And then I forgot to thank the Patreon supporters last time. So thank you guys. Every little bit it's helping me. I'm able to cover my upload costs right now because of that. So I'm not out of pocket for the podcast itself anymore, which is great. And also John Renner Facebook page if you're old fashioned, Gen Xer like I am. I think I'm a Gen Xer. I honestly I'm not sure. But either way. So until next time, keep headbanging and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Good night. Woo!
Woo!